there's a lot of people here. I'm sure they'll get plenty of shout-outs over the next day or two, but just wanted to give it up for Josh, Hardick, Jerry, and the rest of the Jumpstart team for hosting this great event, lining up all the great talent and content, and bringing us all together. Personally, it's been a while since I've attended an event of this magnitude, at least here in Cleveland. So really kudos to Jumpstart and the whole Jumpstart team for leading the charge and making this all happen. As Josh said, my name is Sean Ganley. I'm a partner in Thompson Hine's New Ventures group. We work with startups and startup investors and kind of startup adjacent companies. We have a great panel for you here today with some awesome founders. Up on stage with me, to my left, we have Andrew Hurst, founder and CEO of Delivered, followed by Cahlik, founder of FleetNow, and Dallas Hogensen, sorry.
Close enough.
Yeah, CEO and co-founder of Felux, and we're all excited to be up here and presenting to you guys. So as Josh mentioned, the title of our panel is Forging the Future, Ohio's Tech-Driven Evolution in Legacy Sectors. Essentially, we all know a little bit about Ohio's rich legacy and some of the more traditional industries, manufacturing, steel, gas utilities, and the innovation that accompanied that growth here in Ohio going back to the early 20th century. This morning, our opening keynote, Ted mentioned a few of the innovations in Ohio, from aviation, the traffic light, et cetera. For a number of reasons, though, including outsourcing, foreign competition, brain drain, most of these legacy industries in Ohio have declined or stagnated. We all know the story. And while it may have been known for innovation in the past, depending on who you talk to, that may not be the perception now. The founders we have up here, though, with companies in steel, shipping and logistics and construction, want to change that, and in connection, change how people view Ohio. So today we're going to dive into these founders, dive into their companies, how and why they are attempting to change things, some of the opportunities, some of the challenges and lessons learned from operating in these legacy sectors, with the goal of spreading their stories and hopefully helping out some of the members of our audience today. You guys ready?
Yep.
I know we're not doing Q&A after the panel, but each of the founders up here has let me know if you have questions and want to talk to them afterwards, whether at the reception tonight or tomorrow. They are more than happy. So if you have a question and want to get it answered, please feel free to find them and ask away. So I know Andrew. I know Dallas. We work together with their companies at Thompson Hine. I recently met Carly a couple weeks ago, and I've got to know kind of her story and her background. But for those in the crowd that might not know you guys, tell us a little bit about your companies, what you're trying to do, and how you got involved. And Dallas, we'll start down on your end.
Yeah, thanks, Sean.
And sorry about your name.
It's okay. Funny aside story, when Jerry mentioned who was going to be moderating our panel, like Sean said, he runs Cancel for us, and I thought it was Sean's attempt to start stuffing billable hours for today, but it's been great to have a partner like him and the Jumpstart team, too. Again, Dallas Hogensen, CEO and co-founder of Felux. We are a B2B marketplace for the steel and metals industry and a vertical supply chain platform. Our purpose in life is to bring the industrial industry online to create the best buying and selling experience that exists in the steel and metals industry. We do that by digitizing the entire global supply chain. So even though we buy and sell steel, you can really think of Felux as a data company that is amassing the world's largest set of data to make commerce possible online in one of arguably the most impactful industries that have ever existed in mankind. So I feel very fortunate that a few things brought me here. Number one, I get to work in such an impactful industry, and now I call Cleveland my home. I spent the past 12 years building, investing, and running startup companies in New York, San Francisco, Europe, and Denver. And when I got connected to the opportunity here to build a marketplace in an industry that had never been touched with innovation and digitization, with a chance to go be a leader in this space, it was a really exciting opportunity. And a little bit about how I got involved is I met my other two co-founders during COVID. And so I was living in Denver at the time, and we didn't have the chance to meet in person for the first year. That's how much belief that I had in this opportunity. And it reminded me of the time when I was running sales for Lyft, the rideshare company. It was very analogous to disrupting the taxi industry, making it a very consumer-friendly event. And I just saw so many parallels. I thought this was worth 10 years of my time, maybe 20, to go tackle this journey. And I'll give you a funny story is, I made a commitment to Todd and Chris is in the audience today, was if we go spin this out, we raise capital, I'll commit to moving to Ohio. And during that time, my wife and my son, we had never been to Ohio. So we sold our house in 6 hours in Denver. We drove across the country. And the first day I ever got to Ohio, June 9th, 2021, was the first time I'd ever been to Ohio. That was the commitment and understanding of the opportunity that we thought existed, and why it was so important to build out of Cleveland, just of the rich history of the industrial space.
Yeah, so my name is Cahlik, and I'm the CEO and founder of FleetNow. And we've built a marketplace and software that improves the process of selling construction equipment. There's actually $350 billion that occur every year selling equipment. So we span a lot of different industries like agriculture, construction, equipment rental. We give sellers tons of tools to help automate their sales process and just make selling easier. They have access to retail buyers through our marketplace, but before that sale even occurs, they're saving thousands of dollars on their operations by letting our software do the work and just helping bring accountability to their sales team. I got into the equipment industry on the traditional side when I co-founded a company dedicated to equipment sales when I was 21. And then about 10 years ago, we started an equipment rental company in Cleveland. It's called OHR Rents, if anyone rents equipment out there. And now we're one of the top aerial lift rental companies in Northeast Ohio. But I think what drove me to start FleetNow is I've really just been very passionate about bringing technology, operational efficiency, and marketing to equipment sales, because it's just a really disparate process, and there's a lot. It's very time-intensive and disorganized. So now I'm just doing what I was originally doing, but on a much larger scale and with way better technology.
My name is Andrew Hurst. I am the co-founder and CEO of Delivered. And first, thanks Jumpstart for putting this on. This is a fantastic event. It's the inaugural event, I believe, right? And it's an honor to be able to speak on a panel, so thank you guys. Delivered, in a nutshell, Delivered is nationwide parcel delivery. And I think it's the easiest way to explain it is think of FedEx or think of a UPS that takes a parcel from one area of the country to the next. And we don't own any of the assets. All that is done on others' assets. So that is what Delivered is in a nutshell. And the reason why it's something that we feel is important to take on in terms of accomplish as an organization comes from my experience of spending almost 2 decades in logistics in different forms, both from running family-style local freight companies all the way to SaaS software companies, with extremely large worldwide scale. So a lot of my experience, a lot of the points of view that roll through Delivered are built on this model of experience, of seeing firsthand what the industry needs. And I think most importantly, it's the belief that this is a viable pathway moving forward. Through COVID, we saw a whole bunch of different areas of our world get revolutionized. And I think in many ways it allowed us to think in a different way, to think about the same problems that we've always faced in a unique scenario. So I'm honored to be up here, honored to talk to you guys about Delivered. I'm excited to participate. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks guys. So we'll get right into it now. Dallas, despite Ohio's rich legacy in some of these more traditional sectors, the term Rust Belt, you've all heard it, has been associated with our region in the past, suggesting that these sectors, these industries may not be embracing innovation or technology. Coming from your perspective with Felux, how do you feel about that? What are the pros and cons of operating in a legacy industry like steel here in Ohio?
Yeah, I think first off, it's important to just say about Ohio, like, innovation is not dead. It had just left us during that period of time, right? If you look at the facts of the 1950s, when you had offshoring of manufacturing, moving offshore down to the south, like, it really created those conditions that caused that and depressed the greater whole of the economy here. But if you think about within the borders of Ohio, it's rich with legacy of innovation. I know Ted talked about this earlier in his speech, but we have the invention of flight, the light bulb, Teflon, right? I think he did forget a few other great ones, the golf ball, my all-time favorite, the hot dog, and more importantly, Superman, right? And there's a long list of inventions and creativity that has stemmed from what Cleveland and Ohio has had to offer. I mean, at one point, Cleveland was the #1 city for innovation before the Rust Belt started, and then it fell to the last. And so I think we're now in a period of change, and this event is a great example of that. For the first time, we're bringing individuals together to talk about capital deployment, to talk about innovation, to talk about establishing legacy. And right now, we're behind. If you look at since 2003 to now, capital deployment in Ohio has been around $4 billion, with $2 billion of that coming in 2021. And if you look at Q4, actually up to this year, just in San Francisco, there's been over $39 billion deployed. And so we talk about like why Ohio is such a great place to build the next level of innovation. Well, behind California and Texas, Ohio has the largest amount of manufacturers that exist in the country. And so you think about the opportunity of innovation that sits within these borders, it's not gonna be your sexy next Snapchat. It's not gonna be a next media app. It's gonna be real innovation that exists in very hard legacy industries. And you see that with healthcare. You're starting to see that with logistics as this being a hub. And steel. And so I think what we are on the precipice of doing, and what I really was encouraged by was Mayor Bibb's message, is that I see my role as creating fostering the right environment for businesses to grow, setting up incentives for them to be here, attracting talent, offering place to come and build the next hopefully generational company. And so I think if you look at where the track of Ohio has been and where it's starting to come back to, you have a huge boomerang population coming back. You have the Ohio Fund being started. You have a lot of great growth stage investors showing up here today to see what's happening within the borders of Ohio. And you're starting to have an incentive structure in place where innovation can be rich and start to foster because their customers are in your backyard. And that is very unique to the situation that exists in Ohio, and where I think if you look on the maturity curve, we're just in the beginning of that. You think about the next 10 to 20 years, like this will be a hotbed of innovation that exists in those type of sectors.
Andrew, how about you? What's your experience been like? Obviously, you have some background in the more traditional side of shipping and logistics, but what's your experience been like with disrupting that industry from the tech side? Pros and cons of operating in one of these legacy sectors.
Yeah, being a lifetime Clevelander, sometimes you don't always remember that there's Columbus and Cincinnati, and we've got the 3 C's here in Ohio that make up a bulk. Obviously Toledo and Youngstown, but a lot of the infrastructure that is associated with the 3 C's in Ohio, I think it's relatively unique in that way, and because of our unique positioning, Cleveland or Columbus is in proximity, about 600 miles proximity, which in logistics, mileage is everything. We touch about 60% of the U.S. population. So a little bit to what Dallas was saying, there are some unique characteristics about Ohio specifically that give us a leg up from other areas. So if you're in logistics and you're on the West Coast, you're really sectioned off there. If you're on the East Coast, you're really sectioned off. Being in logistics specifically in Ohio allows you to have so much more access to people and to destinations than you typically would find being on a coast. More specifically, though, about actually operating a business in Cleveland, one of the unique things that I always find is Ohio in general. We are very blessed to live in Ohio in that Ohio is a relatively well-run state. We're not fighting constantly, we're not behind in a deficit trying to make up. We've got some really great government programs that help small businesses or help, venture-type businesses. And Jumpstart's one of those, liaisons for those. And I think in a lot of other states, they might not foster the same sort of forward momentum in markets like logistics or lifting or steel, because it doesn't have the same panache maybe as the hot new consumer social media app. So to answer very, very specifically is I don't know of many areas outside of the Midwest, and I'm sure this is true for Chicago and that, but outside of the Midwest that will capture or allow you to capture the minds of VCs or minds of PEs or minds of customers in the same way as those that are in your backyard that you see in Ohio ultimately.
So Carly, Andrew and Dallas just kind of talked on some of the benefits of operating a legacy industry here in Ohio. How about the barriers? What challenges have you encountered so far, and how are you dealing with them in kind of the construction equipment, construction space?
Yeah, so I think when you are dealing in a legacy industry, things have been done the same way for quite some time. And one of the challenges is when we're meeting with prospective customers, we're asking them to visualize a product that they haven't seen in their industry before. So ideally, when we're talking to a potential customer, they've had some exposure to us with our marketing prior to that. But if they're not aware of what we're doing, I think they have this natural instinct to kind of use their existing frame of reference to decide what we're doing and explain what we're doing. So what that means is sometimes we hear something like, oh, so you're like this company, or oh, you're like an equipment rental software company. We're not doing anything that those companies are doing. But once you start defining yourself by another company, I think you've already lost, right? That conversation is not going your way. So I think one way we kind of try to get over that is just really try to keep the conversation we're having about the customer, their issues, and then how we solve those issues, and less about our 10-second spiel about our capabilities. Really just kind of keep it focused on the customer and how we solve their problems.
Yeah, I think we ran into similar problems, right? Where first 2 years of our life cycle of the company, we had built the most sophisticated technology. And it was really humbling for me, coming a kid from the Bay Area, New York, and coming into the steel industry where I'm probably 25 years younger than all of our customers. And they're like, listen, kid, I don't give a hoot about your tech. I just want to buy and sell steel. And so going through that humbling journey was like, hey, it was working too. I mean, we'd done $500 million in sales on the platform, and yet everybody's like, I don't get it. And then we were just like, listen, we help you buy and sell steel. You don't have to do anything. We're going to meet you where you are. If it's out of email, if it's on your phone, it didn't matter. And once, I learned that, the barrier broke down, the trust started to build. But I definitely could see that was probably a humbling moment in my journey, getting introduced into such a legacy industry.
So kind of dovetail off that, Dallas, you mentioned getting some pushback, right, initially. Are you seeing, and maybe it's just, hey, once you get in front of them, they see the benefits, but are you seeing, market dynamics changing with respect to adopting some of these digital technologies? If so, is there a reason why, and why now? Is it leadership changes, market forces, learning from other areas of the world? Is the playing field changing? What's kind of driving folks to to adopt what you're trying to push?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is unequivocally yes. If you look at, the surveys in our industry, going back, if I look historically, 5 years ago, 5% were interested in digital transformation, right? Now it's 80%. Now, that being said, there's a bunch of limiting factors that exist, and specifically in steel. For the past 100 years, all of the innovation and investment was in steel making, right? Not workflow technology or operational technology or distribution technology. And so if you think about a few factors that we run into that will start to move its way out, right? Number one, you just have an aging industry. For us, I think the average age is over 55. So the sunsetting in our industry is a matter of time that's going to exist. And they don't want to change. They don't want to disrupt what they've been doing. They've been building great businesses, and why change now? So we run into that. We do have a lot of success when you start to see the newer generation come into the industry. But that is a challenge. And if you think about the priority of the business, most of these are very CapEx heavy. And so when they're thinking about, hey, where's the largest return for our investment? What do I understand? What do I know? What do I'm comfortable with? Well, it's, hey, what type of processing machinery? What type of warehousing space? What kind of upgrades can I do there that will return incremental margin on the products that I have in inventory or I'm processing? And so there is, this gap that's definitely closing in that narrative, in those conversations that, oh, I see why this is important. I don't know how to do it. And so because of that, it's funny enough, you look at the legacy technology that exists in our space, the most innovative thing was, maybe 20 years ago. So then you have a connectivity problem, right? We have EDI at best. And so bringing their information, structuring data pipelines, taking that to make it accessible and usable is a significant problem because these companies don't know where to start or don't even have the resources internally to go after it. But the dialogue is there, and I think that's the important part. And the way that we set up our company is hey, we believe that we have the best chance in the world to digitize this industry. In order to do that, we need to meet our customers where they are today, and we need to manage capital internally that gives us the most time to make that impact. Because I think it's just a matter of time for that to happen. But today, it's significant challenges. 8 out of 10 conversations you have are well, I don't even know where to start.
It's funny you mentioned that, Dallas. When I started in logistics, we were still on typewriters and fax machines. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but that was how the industry was. Logistics has accelerated in tech and adopting tech in a significant way, but there are still so many basic ways that require intensive human capital, intensive assets to actually get things done. But the use of technology is accelerating, I think, at a rate that other industries will begin to see because there's just no way to keep up with the rest of the world, number one, but also with demand in many ways. For logistics specifically, especially when you look at the parcel sector, COVID accelerated our growth in the parcel sector by a factor of 2. So, the demand curve that we expected over the next 5 years, we basically captured 5 years of growth in about a year and a half. And that forced a lot of companies to try to think of how do we actually handle this growth? Some companies did very well, others obviously didn't. But what it did help is it helped those companies understand how to buy capacity or how to bring on capacity or manage capacity. But secondarily, I think what it helped us do as a general people is understand that or make it available or possible for other people besides those driving a purple or a brown truck to deliver to our houses, where now we have all sorts of people that deliver packages. And so for delivered specifically for us, to take this on how this works for us is if we didn't get to this point with the general perception of allowing somebody that's not a uniform driver deliver to your house, we probably wouldn't be able to exist in today's world in the way that we are able to today. And so as these industries continue to adopt these methods, it opens up avenues and opportunities for organizations like Dallas and so forth.
Yeah.
Andrew, sticking with you for a second, you talked about in one of your prior answers, the government and,
Don't get me started on the government.
the advantages that Ohio has for operating here. Delivered is your first investor-backed company, right? You have other companies in these industries that were bootstrapped and no investors involved. Specifically looking at your experience with Delivered, what are you seeing in the ecosystem that's been a benefit compared to your other bootstrapped companies? And is there an advantage to taking that route as opposed to some of your other companies?
Yeah, actually, we were talking about this before we came on stage because I do benefit from having both bootstrapped a very successful software startup as well as raising funds in this current company. And how I look at it as if you can bootstrap, and you're willing to handle the slow growth, that's a great opportunity. When you're in certain industries that are either a capital-intensive industries or industries that need to reach a lot of people fast, I don't know if there's any other way but to raise capital from somewhere. So for us, when we were thinking about Delivered, we said, okay, we want this to reach every single human being on the planet eventually, but we're going to start with North America, meaning we need to be able to scale rapidly. How do we get to 300 or 400 million in revenue inside of 3 years? Well, the only way to do that is to obviously spend ahead of revenue to capture that market share. And when you look at what are the options available to you? It's pretty self-explanatory. When I'm reading this book, and this is a little off script, but I'm reading this book, it's regarding 10x is easier than 2x. And I suggest anybody that's out there building a business should read this book. But it's around the concept of when you choose something that is challenging, it really limits your scope on what you're able to do. So when you choose something that's going to change the course of how an industry operates, you only have a few paths. So for us, for Delivered, raising funds was the most important part of our process because we said if we can raise our initial round and get our proof of concept out there, then we know we'll be able to be successful because it just requires the first 10, 20 customers. And we had some great believers at the beginning. We've been able to string together some good stuff. So yeah.
Great. Carly, similar to Andrew, right? You have some background in some more traditional businesses, right? You're kind of non-startup companies. How has that background, that experience on the more traditional side shaped your approach to operating a startup in your space?
Yeah, so I actually still have our traditional company, and they sell their equipment on FleetNow. So I'm still using that more traditional business to shape the day-to-day activities of our software company. So, for instance, if we roll out a new feature or we roll out a new product and it's relevant to OHR rents, then I make them test it. And at first they were a little hesitant, but now every time we have a new product, everybody's really excited about it. And they can't wait to test it. So I guess just giving like an example, recently we added an equipment inspection app that syncs to the marketplace. So we actually had our mechanics and service manager working with the developers on the app. So the idea was if you can guarantee that the machine is in good operating condition, right, you're going to get more for the equipment. But it actually ended up having another benefit that it decreased mechanics inspection time so they can actually spend more time working on the equipment. So I just think that it's important that when you're in that traditional side, that you still keep it in context of the whole industry. You don't want to have a startup that's just trying to fix your individual problems, right? You have to keep it centered on the whole inventory and keep it a little personal, but not, so specific.
That's great. Thanks, Carly. Dallas, you kind of hit on this a little before, but you have a unique experience having, a background in some of the more traditional startup hotspots, the Bay Area, New York, Colorado. How is your experience in Ohio compared? Any lessons learned from, operating in these more, VC-friendly startup hotspots that, might be applicable to other founders here in Ohio?
Yeah, I think this is, it's been a really interesting part of this journey for me. Okay, I want to play a little audible. I want to do a little test here. I want everybody to raise their hand if they're under 25 years old. We got a couple, I like that. Keep your hands up. Raise your hand if you're under 30 years old. All right, raise your hand if you're under 40 years old. Everybody look around. All right, you can put your hands down. Everybody that's over 40. I don't mean to call you out, but put your hands up. Yeah, I do love this, and so it's a really interesting demographic stat right there to look around the room and see that. That's a big difference, Sean. In Silicon Valley in New York, probably the predominant age of this room would be 24, 25. And it's not a good or bad thing, but it leads me to like what I've learned about Ohio and where I see the opportunity, right? When you look at, and Ted talked about this earlier, and so did Mayor Bibb, but those hotspots exist because they have created a petri dish where all of these perfect conditions can go to thrive. You have talent, you have capital, you have a connectivity, you have community, you have distribution, and more importantly, you have really big thinking, and you have research universities as well. And if you look at Ohio, we have all of those elements here, like right, within blocks of where we are. Now, and I mentioned earlier too, if you think about the distribution of capital here is a couple billion over a 20-year period where that's going out daily in those cities. And so I think what my internal mission in life here is, now that I'm home or raising a family here, is that how do we create the next ecosystem for manufacturing tech, for legacy tech, and build it just off the lake here. And what I really have loved about this journey is Ohio has this very everything is earned, not given mentality. It's heads down, it's work hard. And I've really respected that through this journey. And I think it's funny, with my co-founder, led innovation for one of the largest steel companies. I come from a tech background, and for the first couple of years of a relationship, I would just make him so uncomfortable. And he would always bring me back down to earth. And so this really good balance of a relationship that existed. And now recently, a couple weeks ago, he's like, hey, you want to go fly to Dubai next week? They're doing a lot of really interesting things with capital there. Let's get on a plane and go. And I was like, wait, hold on. You want to go to Dubai? He's like, yeah, that's where everything is right now. And I was like, all right, let's do this. And so I think, what it comes down to is that in order for this city, for this state to be a leader there, we have to bring the young people up. We have to be comfortable with the amount of uncomfortableness that is needed for those factors to exist. We have to bring in more capital. We can't be okay with small $1 or $2 million checks. That doesn't create liquidity. That creates a recycling element of ecosystem creation. And so I think about why this is such a great place to build a company is you have people that have been eager for big opportunities, to work on hard problems, to take big swings. And now I think for the first time in probably a decade, those elements in that petri dish are starting to exist. And I applaud everybody that's in this room because I think they have, whether they publicly say it or not, some type of feeling that exists that I want this for what this city can stand for. So, yeah, to your question, I get very excited about what Cleveland can become. I am going to do everything to fight like hell to bring more ambition to this city, and I think more capital, too, to give that opportunity for that environment to thrive here.
Carly, Dallas has a unique experience, operating and living in some of these more traditional startup locations. you have a unique experience in a different way as a female founder, and not only that, a female founder in a more, in a male-dominated, traditionally male-dominated legacy industry. I guess, what's your experience been like based on that premise, and any advice to the other founders or potential founders in the audience that might be helpful based on your experience?
Yeah, so I mean, I am in a traditionally male-dominated environment. In fact, we still have yet to have a customer who's a woman. But I think I would just say that anytime you're bringing in a new background that's different from what the standard is, I think you're bringing a new perspective. And with a new perspective, you're going to see opportunities and you're going to see things that others don't. So I encourage anyone who's thinking about founding a company in an environment where their background's different, I would say go for it, because I think you're going to bring something really unique. And then the other thing I would say is, or I guess some advice I'd give is, I'm always reading this advice where it says you should have a mentor and you should have someone. Well, it can be really hard to find a mentor when it's your company, right? When you're the founder, you're the CEO, and probably your mentor shouldn't be at your company, right? So I think I would say, though, I actually, through my kids, I met two women who have similar jobs to me the past few years. And it's actually been really refreshing and a great, just kind of a great support system, I guess. So I would say that it's worth it to do a little extra work to find a friend that has similar day-to-day challenges that you're experiencing, or it could be through a mentorship program like Jumpstart does. But I think finding someone who sees similar challenges to yours on a daily basis, it's worth doing the work to find that.
Great advice. Thanks, Carly. So maybe to wrap up with a semi-uncomfortable question, and Dallas, you already hit on this a little bit about, driving ambition and bringing in more capital. But, I look around the room and, we have many of the different influential players in the Ohio ecosystem present. What are some of the other needs? What are some of the other asks of the community? What's missing? How can the Ohio community help further? What are we still lacking? Andrew, Dallas, feel free to chime in on that question.
Yeah, so when I decided we were going to actually raise money for Delivered, I was very blessed to have some mentors in my life that were able to help navigate what you would consider, I guess, typically the Ohio VC or the Ohio capital markets. And it was very easy to look at the coasts and say, oh, these are the firms out here, these are the firms out here, and these are who you contact. But in Ohio, it almost feels like a club. It felt like a club that you weren't part of until you got into the club. And I think we need to look at it more along the lines of, and I think Dallas touched on it a little bit in the last statement, was like, we have to be okay with young people with really good ideas and, helping them navigate to where it's something that's worth investing in. But I think this idea, this concept of having a good mentorship program for young people, number one, but also being available. And I think this type of event goes a long way where it makes it available where, you have that guy in Lakewood, Ohio, or whatever, and he's got this incredible idea or she's got this incredible idea. And where do you go with it, right? They can look to Highland Software and say, oh my gosh, there is a software company that can exist in Cleveland, Ohio and make billions of dollars a year. I know it's possible in Cleveland. And in fact, that when we launched our software company in 2011, that's the only thing I held on to, because everyone in 2011 said, well, you can't raise money in Cleveland for a SaaS company. You're going to have to go to the coast. And I was like, dang it, if Highland was able to do it, I can do it. And it was better to just not raise money for that company. So that's a whole other story. But the idea is back then in 2011, I think it was even a much smaller community, and it was much harder to find organizations outside of incubators that would be able to help you kind of jump to that next level and write those bigger checks to really start driving that sort of evergreen type investment back into Ohio, because what happens is like you kind of scale out of the Cleveland market for PE or VC, and then you have these founders going to the coast, and then that's where they maybe stay or settle, and you don't get that evergreen effect like you would typically have in some of those other, coastal type regions. So I would look at it as to say, how do we have more events like this? How can young entrepreneurs find mentors and engage with the firms well ahead of needing the capital, just out of the gate, just to understand the metrics and the mechanics behind how you raise. Is it even good for you? We talked about businesses that didn't raise capital and have been very successful, to where understanding, is the business you're building worth the capital that you think you need to build or raise. So I think it kind of comes around that mentorship and exposure that we're new. I mean, Cleveland's still relatively new in this space, so I think we'll get there. But those are the areas I feel that could use some help.
Yeah, no, we talked about that. Three of us, just before this too. But like, I think that it takes the same amount of time to build a big business as it does a small business, right? And then like you have some limiting factors here, where the fund dynamics, structures, and size of Ohio are relatively small, right? Like they can't write the larger checks. But if you look at what Kwame had done with Drive. They really said, we're going to commit to this. We're going to try to build a big fund. We're going to try to invest here within this ecosystem. And I could just be making this up, so don't quote me on it. But I did hear a stat that 75% of the returns from the first couple of funds were all Ohio-based companies, right? So the largest percentage of the multiple of returns for Drive came from Ohio. So there's proof, right? And that to me is extremely exciting that I get. How do we build upon that notion? But back to your question, Sean, I think the biggest thing we can do here is, one of the first things that I noticed moving to Cleveland is that people operate in very complete silos here. There isn't this connectivity, this vulnerability, this trust that let's win together. We're all going to fail a lot. And our job is to fail faster than our competitors, so we can iterate on product, we can get it out to market, we can learn from our customers. And I think to your point on mentorship and access and a place where you can feel vulnerable, get together, have these conversations, feel like you're not alone, that to me stood out more than anything in my transition to Ohio, that I think that this group has a material ability to impact and change as a call to action.
Well, everyone, that's all we have for you. Can we give it up for our great panelists today? They made my life very easy. I had the easy job. Thanks again to each of you. And like I said, if anybody has any questions for the panelists, they're more than happy to answer them, after the session here, tonight, tomorrow, and feel free to search them out and ask away. Thanks, everyone.